We got us a corpse and cartridge occasion.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I want to take a look at this news article that came out a couple of days ago. The headline on it says, PhiDX on whether or not Tekken 8 can be saved after Season 2 almost killed the game. Now, I will skip probably about the first half of this news article because PhiDX is kind of just talking about his experience from his perspective. When Season 2 dropped, the developers were making a lot of promises. They were talking about defense, they were talking about being able to sidestep, and how all of those things were better. They were really trying to highlight the defensive side of the game. The funny part about Season 2 is that the developers called it a defensive patch. And then when you have someone like PhiDX who's really looking forward to the defense like all of us, he's looking at the details of what they're saying and really understanding, but also he's not aware, just like all of us, we weren't aware of all of the different offensive changes that they had. So they kind of like false advertised Season 2. And for PhiDX, this kind of resulted in a lot of people viewing him as a shield, where he was saying they're listening and we're moving in the right direction, the game is being fixed. Soon as the update lands, everyone sees that's not the case. Now, I don't agree with calling PhiDX a shield because I think he was only listening to what they were saying. We all saw the Tekken talks. We all saw the tweets that they made. They literally labeled it a defensive patch. Now, we all know it was far from the case, but there was no way on earth he could have known what Season 2 would be. And I think the fact that he is kind of like taking a break from Tekken 8, the fact that he kind of like slowed down on his content, the fact that PhiDX is kind of like very uninterested with this game, it speaks volumes to how far Tekken 8 has strayed, because I always am on the side of the fence of like, let's try to bring in more players, right? Fighting games is borderline niche and on the verge of death with every single release. And I do think you need that slow buildup of players and sometimes a fast buildup of players. Tekken 7 sold 12 million copies. That's a lot of success there. And I do think Tekken 8 is trying to continue off of that. But the mistake that they made is that they're kind of throwing away everything that came prior. They have to understand that Tekken is a defensive game. They said that out of their own mouths, but they wanted Tekken 8 to be more offensive. And that offense for a lot of players is so forced. And not only is it forced, but it's consuming the game that once was there. So some of the things that I just talked about is like largely what PhiDX is talking about. Really, the shield word was being thrown at him a lot at the start of Season 2. But I think everyone kind of understands also how he feels and also what happened. So I want to skip all of that stuff and start off at the part where the question that he is asked in this interview says, is Tekken 8 worth saving? PhiDX says, unfortunately, it feels kind of impossible to convince anyone that hasn't played Tekken to try Tekken 8 because they're like, oh, doesn't that game suck? Yeah. The cloud of darkness still lingers. That's probably the roughest part. The passing interest is much lower. Now, before we move on, I will say this is a very important thing, and this is also why I was saying the developers should do something at Game Awards, because not only do they have to fix the game, but they also have to fix the word of mouth. Like, all of the good graces that they built up over Tekken 7 was washed away. Tekken 8 sold 1 million copies, 2 million copies in the first month. We still have not hit 4 million copies. That 3 million copies that was hit like halfway through 2025-ish, we're still there. So this game just needs that extra push. To continue reading, it says, I mean, do you think Tekken 8 is worth trying to save with seasonal updates, or should they move on to a new game? I think it's worth trying to save, but only because I can't see them investing the effort and resources into a brand new game. The visuals appeal there, and the character designs are there. There are a lot of things that people might take for granted in the development of a new game. I think they cooked from the video game package standpoint. They've done so much quality of life stuff that Tekken has needed for a long time to make it compelling modern fighting game package. And this is something that I try to highlight as well. I know the story isn't for everyone, the arcade quest isn't for everyone. Throw break training, punishment training, online practice with 2 people, the customization. I know all of these things may not be for the hardcore players, but the people who are just like casually interested in Tekken, completing all of the different like arcade ladders and getting the endings, that's something that those guys can really like relish in and celebrate and have fun with. But once again, it's kind of clouded by all of the balancing. Now, I also would agree that Tekken 8 needs to fix itself. It needs to end a success, before we could talk about Tekken 9, because Bandai Namco probably will not greenlight a Tekken 9 if Tekken 8 ends in catastrophe. PhiDX says the only issue with the game is what they've done to soil the immediate experience and high-level experience, which is where your loyal fan base is. But if you're just a tourist right now, it's still a very compelling package. The biggest downside, again, is if you want to go deeper, it's ugly. And this is what I say, right? If you're kind of new to Tekken, or if you're just like at the basic levels of the game, it's a good game. But once you start to really understand the game, even if you started in Tekken 7, people who got good at Tekken 7 and then switched to Tekken 8 when the game dropped, even those guys are thrown for a loop by some of the stuff that they're doing. It's too far in a crazy direction. PhiDX says, I honestly think it's worth saving seasonally. Well, crazy from a standpoint of what I perceive to be Japanese development culture. I could only speculate, but big things like deleting moves. Oh my God, I can't believe PhiDX said that. I love that. This is something that I talk about and I get hate for it. It's time to delete moves from Tekken. We have about 7,000, 8,000 moves. A lot of them are redundant. A lot of them are broken. A lot of them is removing identity. Deleting moves is necessary. Or maybe do something like Tekken 8 Ultimate. This is something that content creators like Joe Budden talk about, where they're talking about, even Majin Obama, where they talk about Season 3 being this Tekken 8 DR style update, Dark Resurrection style update. That's how big of a shift we need. It'd be functionally like a new season, but packaged as a revised game. Tekken has done that before. Tekken Bloodline Rebellion, Tekken 7 Fated Retribution, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 Ultimate. They done repackaging and relaunching, and I would add this on myself that Tekken 8 needs to do that. The question is, do they do so at the expense of the live service vision because they wanted to do a live service Tekken? If they're brave enough to delete moves and do things like that, then it could work. I think the direction in the latest patch has been promising. The interviewer says, maybe this is just a me thing, but it almost feels like Tekken 8 is designed more for the viewer experience than playing it. I know it sounds weird, but, and then PhiDX says, no, I would agree with that. I think combo length is absolutely needs to be addressed. And I'll say this again. During the beta, Harada said that combos were too long, and he said heat was causing that problem. And now, while knowing that, in Season 2, they still added tailspins to every character, even though in Season 1, some of the characters who had the craziest wall travel and damage, like Dragunov and Yoshimitsu, had wild tailspins. So why did they give it to everyone? Hopefully they can scale that back. The interviewer also says, do you think that the stigma around Tekken 8 being very hard fighting game is overblown? Tekken has a very difficulty curve to Street Fighter just because it feels easier to get into at the low levels. PhiDX says, I think it's intuitive to hold back to block. I think it's intuitive to hold down back to block low. I think not jumping makes it kind of clear. Okay, it's a grounded game. That makes the rules around most things feel reasonable. The intermediate level, where you decide to sit down and actually learn stuff, is where it gets interestingly hard. I don't think that part is overblown, but I think it won't affect most people just starting. The shame of Tekken 8, both Season 1 and Season 2, but especially Season 2, is that they made that immediate experience worse by changing a bunch of frame data. And this is kind of like where I operate, is in the intermediate player base. We don't have all of the knowledge like a pro, and then we're good enough to not be someone new. But all of these stances and all of these situations is so much to lab, and then you have to really lab the details of each stance option, and then all of the frame data and how to counter it. It's really so much to ask out of an intermediate player, and this is why a lot of people feel overwhelmed and they feel ambushed when some of these attacks come their way. When a character do a stance and then you get guard broken, it's kind of like a flashbang for most people, because they know that they're doing the right thing by holding back and looking to play defense, but then you just have these big moves. A pro player may consider it a slow move, something that's reactable, but an intermediate player is thinking about so many different things: a low, a grab, a heat smash, boom, guard break. The interviewer says, do you feel like Bandai Namco ignoring the content creator side of Tekken 8 has significantly contributed to the declining interest? PhiDX says, significantly contributed. I want to say no. I think the significant issue with Season 2 update, but it is a lost opportunity. If Season 2 had been a neutral patch where some things got better things, some things got worse things ended up being about the same frustration level, it'd be different. or if things got extremely better, marginally better, maybe even a little worse. Honestly, if it was any other outcome other than what happened, I think we would have stayed on a similar track from season 1. So when faced with the question of how do we fix it, I see it as two-pronged approach. First, fix the game so that competitors aren't the ones complaining. When you have your top pros complaining, it's not a good look, right? If Arsenal and Nier enjoying the game verbally on Twitter, I think it does a lot. Then once the trauma is healed and spike interest, whether it's a guest character or, it really have to be a guest character to bring people back to try it. I think that's how the game gets saved. Everyone sees it. Everyone sees that the first thing you do is balancing, and then once the players are happy, you do some fire guest character. I wouldn't agree with Tifa, but I understand why they say Tifa. I more so would say Goku because Dragon Ball is owned by Bandai Namco, the video game rights. Just like Bleach, just like One Piece, Bandai Namco owns a lot of these anime IPs, and anime is absolutely on fire right now. I know Tekken players aren't really interested in like a Dragon Ball Z character because they think that breaks the mold, but we need something that is going to put Tekken on the map because Tekken is walking towards death. So what do you want Tekken to like steal a bunch of fame with a Goku, or do you just play it safe as in die? That's how I view it. I could be wrong, but that's just how serious I'm viewing this situation.